Okay. So, Minister, welcome. Welcome to the McCain Institute. We're trying our very best to be a different kind of policy institute, to try to focus on leadership and to try to focus on how we can actually affect change even from outside of governments, but as a policy institute dedicated to core values and policy programs where we can make a difference. And so I want to welcome you here.
Thank you.
Well, what we're here to do is have a conversation about leadership. And we've done this with a number of speakers, and everyone from Henry Kissinger and President Clinton to authors and former ministers. And I think both your personal experience and the experience of the Baltic states is a story that's really worth telling. And so I wanted to invite you to say a few words about that. The first thing I would like to ask, and maybe start with, is tell us about 1988, 1989, 1990, 91. You were a student at the time. You had perestroika, glasnost in the Soviet Union. You had roundtable talks going on in Poland. You could start to see that the ice was breaking. And I guess the issues for you to elaborate on, what was your personal role and what were you doing? What were you thinking about? Did you believe change was possible? And what did leaders do that made it work, that made the difference?
Well, how to put it in short words. 1987, June 14th, was the first date when the first demonstration in whole Soviet Union took place in Riga, in the capital of Latvia, next to the famous Monument of Freedom built in 1935 and dedicated to our republic. And at that time, I was 21-year-old, and I think in this case, sometimes if you have not enough experience of politics or of life, that can be in fact helpful, because you do not have enough fear, and sometimes you do not have enough knowledge. And I remember very vividly how this information was spread about this first demonstration, because of course, once you live in totalitarian society, nobody writes in newspapers about that, and nobody tells you know that this gathering is happening there. So the first source was the usual source that my family was using. It was in fact American Voice, which was going on radio at 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock every day, and Soviets were doing everything to distract it. So actually, if you had an older radio, it was much better to listen it, because this was not so sensitive to all these distractive sounds, like tracks that were going. And I very much remember my first feeling. My first feeling was, now it started. So probably it was from the way how I was growing up in a family, but I have had a very big belief from the very beginning that now started something immensely huge, and this will go on. And if I would be maybe 20 years older, maybe I would not believe in this. But at that time I thought, okay, this is a time when my country will be free again. And this took only 4 years, and that happened. And it was the first demonstration that it went on. And I was a student, I was taking part in this whenever I could. I was trying to also organize with my fellow students some student movements and organizations to participate in this. So that's how it started.
Yeah. Were you ever afraid yourself?
Well, we were afraid. Particularly, it was in 1991 when we could see that the repressive apparatus of the Soviet system is starting to become anxious, because they understood that we will not stop. We will take our freedom, we will take our independence, we will not stop. And they wanted not to allow this to happen. And at that time, of course, I again did not have all the information, what was happening in Moscow, what was happening in Kremlin, what was happening with Gorbachev. Only last week, actually, I saw a very interesting German documentary movie where one of the journalists were interviewing the last days of the Soviet Union, when Gorbachev was actually speaking with defense minister of Soviet Union at that time, Yazov, about so-called nationalists and independence fighters in Lithuania and Vilnius. because Lithuania was the first country to hit in 1991 January with losses, human losses on the streets, and he was asking, so can't you, get away with these guys and can't you establish order? And it was interestingly, I know now from today's perspective, the defense minister was asking, well, can you write me a paper about this, or to give an order? And Gorbachev was telling, well, is it not enough with my word to do this? So obviously, up to now, or very lately, Gorbachev has always denied that he knew about these events.
Right.
So looking from another perspective, from the barricade other side, we were afraid that they will come and shoot us. Just like the things are happening in Syria or somewhere else. But we decided that we believed that with our peaceful movement, we did not have any weaponry, basically. We were following Gandhi's approach that we will do it in a calm, peaceful manner. So,
were there key leaders that you still look back on as people who made a critical difference at a critical time in Latvia succeeding or not succeeding?
Well, I think at that time, if you are looking now back, we of course can see that leaders and fighters are becoming more and more. But at that time you had, I think, a lot of heroism on the side of the ordinary people, which have been doing, I think, the most of the job. But as far as the leadership, I think you can distinguish here the persons who were ready to sacrifice, who were ready to take the decisions, and those who were kind of afraid, who were for different reasons, either for their own safety or for some other reasons, they were hesitant to make decisions. And I think I cannot blame any of them, because those times are not easy. You don't know what will happen to you in a day or in an hour, so it's very human that you are afraid, but at the same time, somebody has to do this, and I think the solidarity and belief in something higher that makes people to move together and to finish this. Because I think in our case, especially in Latvia, I think, yes, we had a leadership, but this leadership very much depended on the feeling of a breath in the neck from the nation. So, and you are a very powerful politician. You can be a very powerful leader if you really feel that people are behind you. And it's very difficult to make any decision if you don't have this feeling. So if you can manage to make a crowd to be behind you, then you can do it.
Right. So one of the things you were talking about on another occasion was the responsibilities of citizenship. Your analogy was being a hammer or being a nail. And so what do you see as an individual, even if you're not at a high political level, what are the individual society's responsibilities to act as a leader?
Well, maybe it's not popular in our days, especially in Western societies, but I am a strict believer in traditional ancient Greek approach, which was maybe the best characterized by Aristotle, telling that human is a social animal. So that basically means that you must be active in politics, because all Greeks believed that if you are not socially and politically active, you do not exist, you simply waste your life. If ancient Greek will meet on the streets of Washington or Riga a person who is telling you, no, I am actually not interested in politics, he will tell, why do you waste your life? What do you do here? And I have a strict belief in this. Let's not waste our social capital. But in order to be active citizen, you must also be knowledgeable. And this is a second characteristic of a Greek understanding of active person. You must understand. You must not only run behind somebody, you must understand what you're doing. So I'm very much in favor of educated society and active society. This is the only way how we can strengthen our liberal democracy, again in a philosophical sense, liberal democracy.
Are there any examples, even looking outside of Latvia, that you would point to as examples of people who have embraced that philosophy of taking responsibility and playing the role of a leader?
You know what? I was frequently thinking myself, what would be those characters, those persons from whom I could learn, which could be people which would really make me move further. And you know, maybe because I'm too much involved in academic work, or maybe I'm simply too arrogant, but I cannot tell you one person. But at the same time, I think it's very normal, because if somebody is asking, visiting at home, and somebody is asking, look, you have a shelf of books, and which book is the best book? It's a problem to say. You have a lot of good books. It depends on the concrete momentum. And if you would visit my office, I would say that I have a sin to put behind the national flags not only one picture, which usually should stand there, but have 3 pictures on my wall, 3 advisors. And probably you would know, at least you should know, 2 of them. The third I can excuse if you do not know. So the first one, going into the historic perspective, is Niccolo Machiavelli. Niccolo Machiavelli, because I think he is misunderstood by those who do not read him. Niccolo is, in my understanding, the first political scientist, and he's the one who tells the truth. He doesn't give the illusion how state should look, he tells how the state looks. So read him, analyze him, and he helps me. The second person is Duke Jacob of Courland, which comes from my region in the 17th century. And I think he was a great guy, because even at that time, surprise, surprise, Courland, or part of Latvia, was a small political entity. And he had to survive between the big powers, and he made actually flourish our economy, flourish our trade. In that time, Duchy of Courland even bought 2 colonies, which was Tobago and Gambia. So they had the trades and ships and everything happening. And yes, and his godfather was King Charles II of Britain, who was decapitated.
Right.
So basically, he made the small entity, the small political entity, despite of all influences, a great issue. And the third one is not coming from Latvia again. The third one is Finnish Marshal Mannerheim. Marshal who stood up on behind of the small nation, small country, in the famous Winter War in 1939 against the Soviet Union. And this is a blame to us, to both, that in that days we did not have such type of leadership compared to Finland. Because it's not a question to win the war if somebody who is bigger attacks you, either internationally or on the street. The thing is, you have to survive, and you have to survive with dignity. And I think Marshal Mannerheim granted this to Finnish nation.
Right. So I mean, these are very interesting examples, because you have someone who is known for political astuteness and sincerity, military success, and economic and business success,
and
you
regional,
mentioned,
yes.
and regional. Where do you place values in this?
Well, you know, I should be careful here, because, you see, we politicians, and we society in general, we love to speak about values, but we must be sincere to ourselves to understand that not always we mean what we speak. By telling this, I think the value issue for me is, first of all, of personal nature. So that is a question of personal integrity and personal political integrity. So you should speak about values if you are really ready to execute them with your own example. And that is the biggest problem, what I can see also in our Western world, that we frequently speak about values, but we not always mean that. Either it is with our partnership with authoritarian regimes, or, you know, values are important only towards those countries where we do not have business interests, and etc. And I understand this, that we have to make compromises, because politics are about compromises. You cannot always stand only for values. You sometimes have to stand for so-called real politics, which is against the values. So I would characterize myself as a realistically thinking idealist.
Right.
Because you have to preserve for yourself that morals that you can sleep without nightmares. But once you go into politics, you must understand that for the higher sake, not for your sake, sometimes you have to, you will be forced to challenge those values, unfortunately. But the world is not ideal. I mean, if we would be leading our people and our nations only in ideal ways, then we would have something holy around us here. It's not happening.
But that's a very interesting phrase that you use too. So a realistically thinking idealist. Or another phrase that I've heard in another context was values-based realism. So how do you assess the leadership we have around the world today, whether it's in the US or in Germany or in France? Do we have people who are both values-based and realists?
Well, I don't want to speak about concrete people or also about the concrete countries, but I cannot avoid to mention the issue of the United States. Because, and here it comes together with one highly important political item which is called soft power. So here you can study more, I mean, you can refer to Joseph Nye, what soft power means, etc. But soft power basically gives us a chance to win hearts and minds of people without war, without pressure. They simply tell, okay, I agree with you because you speak the truth, you speak the right things. And looking from my Latvian perspective, I can see that latest events in the world, they are very much damaging the soft power of the United States. And by damaging the soft power of the United States, it increasingly damages our security also in the Baltic region. So I'm just wishing that we can fix this issue, because we have to preserve the soft power of the Western world, European, American, transatlantic link, and we have to figure out how to do this. And probably we can do this with example, because the requirement towards leaders is very high. If you are a small country from which not much depends, you can make mistakes because that will not affect others. If you are a big country, then from that depends lives and future of many other nations around. So I definitely would not like to be in my colleague's Chuck Hagel's place. I would not like to make those decisions of what Obama is making. But soft power is important, and morals. If we speak about morals, we can theorize here for a long time. I think we can refer again to Machiavelli, at least my understanding of Machiavelli, or Skinner's, Skinner's understanding of Machiavelli. But if we will be able, again, probably I repeat, but if we will be able to preserve our integrity, then our politics will be integral to it.
Let me give you one example, what I consider soft power, which was the U.S. decision not to recognize the Baltic states' incorporation into the Soviet Union. Didn't cost any troops, didn't cost any money, but it was a strong and clear political position, one that was idealistically based, maybe not realistically based, but it was certainly idealist. A lot of countries didn't do that. They just accepted the occupation and incorporation of the Baltic states into the Soviet Union. Did that make a difference?
I think that this concrete example that you mentioned makes an enormous, huge difference. And I think that because of this, maybe in a short or medium term, unwise political decision by United States, made actually, or gave a hope and a light for generations of people in my country and countries around. Because that was probably the basic hope what people could stick. They can know that one day this thing will change. Probably this was also one of the main decisions why in 1987 I knew that things will change. So I think that this is again a decision which required courage. Maybe it was not smart in concrete case. Maybe there were a lot of critics about this. I don't recall those times. I don't know. I was not studying that. But I think we should be able to stand for the right thing. We should be able to stand for the right thing also if it is a short term cost something. So you should not be, as a politicians, again afraid to make decisions which are not maybe always popular or not always very smart. And maybe this is frequently lacking in our political environment in Europe, and maybe here also in the United States today.
Right. Well, my recollection, and I'm sure it's yours too, there was a movement in the 1970s and early 80s for peaceful coexistence, not only détente on a military scale, but peaceful coexistence at a political level between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. Meaning, we'll just accept things the way they are, rather than standing for change. And certainly, I think the fact that you had people, leaders in the United States, leaders in Western Europe at the time, people in Central and Eastern Europe, like Václav Havel, like Walesa, who were not accepting that things would always be the way they were. That, to me, made a huge difference. How do you view that?
Right. Again, this was a major hope that people would not give up their principles, because if this peaceful coexistence movement would win in a case, then probably we would not have gained also that support in 87, 89, 91, and maybe such people as Václav Havel simply would not survive so long. He was not planning to be a president, he did not want to be president. Okay? So we have a lot of people which have been rising from the streets up to such positions like him. But with my today's experience, I of course understand also that camp which is speaking about this peaceful existence, because somehow we cannot always fix the world. We cannot make justice always to prevail in that time span of our lives. And I can mention you a lot of examples. Look to North Korea. I mean, what is happening in North Korea is a huge disaster. But what can we do? What can we really do? We will not send troops there. We can't do this. I have a very strong belief that North Korea will be free. So, knowing also my personal experience, no doubt these people will be free. So we have to get ready to this moment when it will happen. But how to advance, how to influence this? Honestly speaking, no good medicine or recipe exists here from my side too. It's very difficult decision. This is not the only country.
Well, take a hard case. Take Syria.
Well, I think with Syria we made the mistakes. And I think that our reaction somehow should be quicker, and we should not allow to go so deep. I think now it's quite late to fix many things, because once time is past, you cannot turn into backwards. But I think we made the mistakes, and once I'm speaking about all these type of revolutions or events in such countries around the Mediterranean, I very much recall one book which is called The Future of Freedom by Farid Zakaria. And I think there is one good advice to practitioners in politics, that we should not press only forward with democracy, but we should understand that we live in liberal democracy. And we should first press maybe with those individual rights, with economic rights, with the person's rights. Because if you're looking how Europe was developing, in 17th and 18th century, for instance, Great Britain was not a democracy, but it was a liberal country, becoming a free country. And democracy came afterwards. So if we are just going, let's say, to Central Asia and we are just lecturing about democracy, and we are asking from them to, let's say jump higher than they, or punch higher than their weight, nothing will happen. I think we have to be, on the one hand, a little bit patient, but on the other hand, we also must keep our requirements strong. So this is a balance between this ideal approach and the practical approach, which is the most difficult. That's the most difficult thing, how to keep this in balance. And I think as far as Syria and maybe some other regional countries, we somehow went out of balance and out of time in decision making.
Interesting. Out of balance and out of time. We were together in Stockholm earlier this year, and you spoke at the Free World Symposium. And I was struck at some of what you were saying at the time about the way the U.S. and the Nordic and the Baltic states need to think about Russia. Are you trying to send a little bit of a wake-up call?
Well, looking from the pragmatic perspective, we have to be careful, because there's a lot of those who want to make, also in this case, a peaceful coexistence. And we are definitely not against the peace. We are for that. But we don't want also that some of the Western nations are living in the imagined or virtual world. The world is changing. And the worst thing what politicians can do is not to see those changes timely. And I think this applies also to Russia. Russia is not a democratic country. Russia is increasingly authoritarian country. I think one of the litmus tests, of course, will be what will happen next year, for instance, with such persons for the coast. Would he be allowed to come out of prison or not? And in our case, being a neighbor of such a big and powerful and authoritarian country, I can tell honestly, there is no bigger wish for us as to become friends with Russia, as to see Russia as a free, prosperous and democratic country. But let's not think that this will just happen by itself. Let's not imagine that this is de facto. This is not a de facto thing. And what is happening in the last 5 years makes us to ring this bell and tell us, sorry, we think that the things are going a little bit in a different direction. And if the Western world, if the countries around the Baltic Sea, if America will not recognize that, then we will be the losers, because we have not been living up to reality.
Okay. Final question. You're not an old man by any stretch. You've got many, many years ahead of you. But allow yourself to think a generation down the road now. What advice would you give to people about their roles in society and leadership and politics? What would you tell them based on your own experience?
Well, learn, be active, be yourself. Main thing is be yourself, and do first of all the things what you really believe and love. Don't run behind the position, don't run behind the money. If you will do what you really love and what you like, positions and money will come. So don't let yourself to be misled by these short values which we are all running behind in our material world.
Minister of Defense, Artis Pabriks, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we can give him a hand. Thank you. This is great. So we'll do a good job editing this and get